Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. This week, rock climbing gear wears out, but it can still live on as art.
Sometimes the ropes or like the bolt hangers, I know where they came from. I know they came out of Linville Gorge. I know they came from Cottonwood Canyon. And so when I'm building these pieces and I can tell people like, oh yeah, that one came from Linville Gorge. Like you might have climbed on this.
The response to Hurricane Helene shows us some of the best in people, with neighbors helping neighbors.
Because I couldn't just sit around and do nothing. I had to jump into action the very first day.
And surf's up on the Golly River. Yeah, it's a thing.
I've gone to the beach and they're like, oh, where do you live? Like, where do you normally surf at? And I'm like, oh, I live in West Virginia. And then they just give you an awkward stare.
You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia. Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. In nearly every sport, gear wears out. Boots lose their tread. Kayaks and canoes spring leaks. Climbing rope frays. Most of it you have to throw away. In western North Carolina, though, there's a climber turned crafter who keeps old climbing gear out of the landfill and finds new life for old equipment. Folkways reporter Emily Chen Newton has this story.
As rain pours down on a screened-in porch, 8 women, all climbers, are gathered for a workshop in Hendersonville, North Carolina. They're here to learn from Shelby Treichler.
You're going to be learning some like basic stuff and then some of like my stylistic things. So one of my stylistic things is being able to get like a really tight coil.
Today they're making can cozies out of old climbing rope. Shelby instructs the group how to coil the rope to make the flat base, and then how to bring the rope up and around the can, forming the walls of the holder.
So if the last part of it was all about keeping the glue line straight so it could go flat, this step up is about having it at kind of like a 45-degree angle.
Shelby points out there's a long tradition of climbers repurposing their ropes, mostly into woven rugs. But when she started turning her art into a business, Cactus to Pine, around 2019, there weren't that many people treating it as a craft and selling their work. Now, at her workshops, she shares important tidbits like how to not glue your can to your cozy while you're making it.
Like, just twist your can every now and then and make sure that it's not getting stuck to it. I've had several warm beers in the middle of the day where I've gotten cans stuck in it. So I'll just go ahead and crack it and drink it because it's easier to get the empty can out than a full can. Waste not, want not, just trying to say what I can.
She's also developed a signature aesthetic to her work. The pieces that she does with coiled rope seem to have no beginning and no end, the rope mysteriously folding in on itself. Other pieces require her to delicately remove the inner core from the sheath of the rope. She then dyes it to make colorful wall hangings, and she does all of this in a 12 by 6 foot trailer on a 5-acre plot north of Asheville.
It's a small space, so we got to maneuver some things.
The trailer has wood paneling inside, and as Shelby says, it kind of feels like the hull of a ship. Her grandfather's workbench is the centerpiece here. Surrounded by climbing ropes, spools of thread, and various tools, it has strong metal legs and a wooden top.
Like old grain wood, you can tell that the grain is really tight on it. And then it's just covered in dings and scrapes and burns and pieces of tape from where my grandfather worked on it. And my dad remembers sitting at it when he was a kid, and now I'm putting my own dings into it.
She started working with climbing ropes after seeing old ones being thrown away at the gym where she climbed. She then picked up weaving and knot tying skills from climbing and nautical books and YouTube, she says. But her connection to the materials and the craft comes from her mother and grandmother, who worked in a tuxedo shop.
In high school, my sister and I would get to work during prom season. We would go work in the tuxedo shop that she worked at. She was like a part-time seamstress there because they would have so many tuxes coming in and out for all the high school proms. My sister and I would get hired, and they would just like slip us some cash to break down the tuxes as they were coming back in after prom. And we also, anything we found in the pockets we got to keep, which was always really exciting.
Shelby treats all of the found and donated materials she works with now with great care, throwing nothing away. She makes another version of can holder that uses flattened rope instead of coiled. After removing the inner core, she flattens short scraps of rope, essentially turning them into fabric pieces, and then sews them together.
So now 2 pieces become 1, and then 3 pieces become 1, and then eventually they all just become 1 canvas leaf.
Her wall hangings are made from the rope's white inner core. She dyes the core strands various colors, then glues them onto a wooden backing to create her designs, flowers, fruits, and vegetables. This way, she's truly upcycling the whole rope.
There we go.
But for Shelby, it's not only about saving the rope from the landfill, it's also about saving the stories. Whenever she can, she makes sure whoever buys her products knows where they've come from, especially when she's upcycling climbing hardware called bolt hangers that are actually drilled into the rock at specific locations.
Sometimes the ropes or like the bolt hangers, I know where they came from. I know they came out of Linville Gorge. I know they came from Cottonwood Canyon. And so when I'm building these pieces and I can tell people like, oh yeah, that one came from Linville Gorge. Like you might have climbed on this.
And sometimes the stories carried by the ropes and hardware are heavier than just a casual day of climbing.
More recently, I had a person contact me that had lost their spouse and asked if I would make an urn cover for them. And, I'm going to get emotional. That one was like kind of hard. And I was so incredibly honored. They sent me some ropes that they had climbed on together. And I asked if they wanted any input on what it would look like. And they said they just loved my work and they just wanted me to do whatever. So that one was, it's just like, it's so much bigger than just climbing rope. Like this is what people spend all of their free time and energy doing. It's not just a sport. Like for a lot of us, it's like a lifestyle. Even though I don't climb as much as I used to, I still will always consider myself a climber.
Because her work is well known in the climbing community, when a young climber named Annabelle McClure was killed in a car accident several years ago, one of her friends brought Annabelle's ropes to Shelby.
When Annabelle climbed and you watched her, she just looked like a dancer on the rock. It would often just stop people in their tracks if they were like walking by. Like she was just the climber that you would just want to watch climbing because it was just so beautiful.
This is Andrea Hassler. She and Annabelle were close climbing partners, and with the type of climbing they were doing, multi-day trips on big, difficult stone, that relationship is a tight bond.
Your joy and successes, as well as your failures and fears, you experience that all together and you can almost feel it like viscerally, like through the rope. You know, somebody's up there climbing and they're scared and trying hard, or they're having a great time and you're both tied into either ends of this rope. And that is your literal lifeline.
So even though Annabelle's family distributed some of her gear to friends, it just never felt right to Andrea to climb on her ropes. And after Andrea explained the ropes might not be safe as they got older, Annabelle's mother, Dana, made up her mind.
You know, Dana is a very strong-willed, smart, and decisive person. She goes, okay, that's it. We're not climbing on these ropes. I've made the decision.
With Dana's permission, Andrea reached out to Shelby to make some pieces for the family out of her rope, and also a batch of can cozies with neck straps for her friends. They call them cruisies.
So I pretty much designed this product with her in mind.
And the fact that Shelby is based in North Carolina made the whole project feel like a homecoming. See, Annabelle has family roots there, and when she and Andrea traveled to the state, Andrea says you could just tell that Annabelle felt at home.
It was unlike any other place that we had been to whenever we came to North Carolina. It was just very obvious that she had this really deep connection, like all of those stories from her childhood that her parents would tell. And this one was a little different because it wasn't just connection to the climbing. It was like connection to the place. And I could see it. She was just deeply connected to it. Very like a coming home.
So Andrea picked up Annabelle's rope in Colorado, where her parents now live, and drove it across country to North Carolina.
And I met up with Shelby in North Carolina in the Linville Gorge. And we went and climbed with Annabelle's rope, and then Shelby hiked the rope out.
The items Shelby made from that rope, now scattered across the country, are part of how Annabelle lives on. Each piece of rope core and thread are put to use, which is exactly what she would have wanted, Andrea says. Here she is reading from Annabelle's obituary.
Even after her time on this earth has passed, Annabelle is still giving by being a tissue donor. Her legacy now includes helping someone else see, have a heartbeat, feel the sun, or take a walk. Please go for a walk, hike, ride, or climb, and keep sending it to remember our Annabelle.
Andrea does climb and hike in Annabelle's honor, and often with her can cruisie around her neck.
And so if I'm like sitting around a fire drinking beer, it's like with her rope. It's like she would just love that. She would just love that. It's like a little piece of her that gets to live on in another way and still feel connected to her and still feel her there, like we're tied in.
Back in Shelby's workshop on wheels, sitting in front of her grandfather's workbench, she says she's honored to be the caretaker of these objects and their stories.
I mean, I'm surrounded by things from loved ones that aren't here anymore. And for me, it's like the best way to honor them is to keep using their stuff. So getting to work on these pieces is always such an honor. And of course, there's going to be some heavier stories.
But through Shelby's art, those heavy stories are woven into new stories that live on. For Inside Appalachia, I'm Emily Chen Newton.
Emily had help with that story from Folkways reporter Rebecca Williams. Shelby Treichler, her dog, and the Cactus to Pine workshop trailer are all safe after Hurricane Helene. To see photos of Treichler's art, visit our website, wvpublic.org. Earlier this year, we introduced you to Tu and Chu Lee. They're Hmong farmers in Morganton, North Carolina, who grow and sell heirloom rice, like their popular sweet, sticky rice.
The sweet sticky rice has a very nice kind of a honey sugarcane aroma, a subtle freshness that is hard to explain.
Yeah, you have to experience and smell it for yourself to understand.
Growing rice in Appalachia might seem unusual, but not for members of the Hmong community. They've been raising varieties from Laos in western North Carolina for nearly 50 years. After Hurricane Helene, Folkways reporter Rachel Moore called Tu Lee to see how the Lee's farm is faring.
So it's been a few weeks since Hurricane Helene hit. What has your experience been like?
We got hit, but I can honestly say we are well blessed because we're not hit in a super major way like everybody else that I see on the news and stuff. They really, really got it bad. All we have here is a few damaged outbuildings, fallen trees that can be cleaned up over time. We did lose our late fall, early winter crop, both of those just greens. Also lost a heavy duty truck for us on the farm to the flood, of course. But all in all, we fared pretty well. Feel really bad for our friends in Old Fort, Swannanoa, down there at the Chimney Rock area. And man, they really, really had it bad.
You said that you lost a few things. What was it like the first time you stepped on the farm after the hurricane came through?
Our fields, everything was submerged under roughly 5 to 6 feet of water, and all really bad muddy water. And that's where the majority of our fall winter crop is at. So they got pretty well drowned out, covered in mud and water. When we finally was able to walk out there into the fields, there was power lines down everywhere. We couldn't go across several areas due to not just the power line, but the power pole broken off and crossing the road. We got to a place that it was finally able to allow us to get through, and there was water everywhere. Luckily, we didn't have the fast water, so it didn't wash the topsoil, but it added a lot of mud to our fields and then on top of our greens and stuff.
And are you all able to go to farmers markets again?
Absolutely. We are determined to go to farmers market, whether we sell anything or not. I said, well, we'll go, and as long as the markets are open, we'll go And if we sell stuff, then we do. If we don't, then everything we take, we're going to donate to the shelters and the relief efforts. Everybody's donating stuff, but it's generally dry canned food and stuff like that. It'd be a relief to see somebody that actually brings in fresh produce, tomatoes and greens and stuff like that for the relief worker, and actually give a really good, solid meal to those that are out there working and those that are without.
Do you know of other Hmong farmers who have been affected by Hurricane Helene?
Within our family group that I know, we have my aunt that has the flowers. All her flowers are gone. They're pretty much devastated. And then all our families that we know of that grow rice, nice thing is they already have everything harvested before the storm came. That's a good thing for us to have those things harvested early like that.
You mentioned losing out on some winter crops, but you plan to replant them. Will losing those crops impact your farm at all or your revenue?
On the financial spreadsheet that I have created to track what we grow and what our potential harvest is, it looks like we would be right at $63,000 loss in the crop. In the grand scheme of things, that's not anything compared to what people have lost.
And what can people do to support farmers during this time?
To support farmers, go to farmers market. That will give a little bit of relief. Like us, we didn't lose everything, but the little bit of relief does help. By doing that, it also will give the farmers more of a incentive, desire to continue doing what they're doing.
You all have the Hmong New Year coming up next month. What are the preparations for that like, given the hurricane and all the flooding?
I don't know how the traveling would be, but the New Year is always going to go ahead and happen. It might be a little bit more somber. The festivities will be there. The number of people may be dropped slightly. However, the New Year celebration is always going to continue to go on because it's one of those things that everybody looks forward to due to the fact that it's only happening once a year, and this is the time to celebrate everything that we have received for the entire year. Culturally, it's a means for everybody to gather and to revisit old friends and old neighbors, and whether anybody has a lot to share or a little to share, everybody's willing to come out and just be a part of that.
Are there other things you think it's important for people who aren't in Western North Carolina to know about all of the flooding and the hurricane?
For us in Western North Carolina, we are, as a whole community, we're very resilient. We care about our neighbors. In Western North Carolina, all the churches are open up to receive and give support. There's a whole bunch of folks here that didn't lose things. They're readily and willing to go and donate either money or products that they have, or they'll drive all the way into Statesville and Charlotte to the Sam's and Costco's, and they'll buy a pickup load worth of stuff and bring it back here. And they just, wherever community they're able to drive into, if people don't have food and water, they would just hand them out. That is something that is not a thing that you teach and promote. That is something that's deeply embedded into the psyche of the community here, of the Southern hospitality and the love for your neighbor and care and kindness. The reason why I live here all my life is because I've seen that all my life. It's something that is really, really nice about Western North Carolina.
That story and the one before it are part of our Folkways reporting project, which covers arts and culture in our region. You can find more Folkways stories at our website, wvpublic.org. Across the South, car makers are investing big in the shift to electric vehicles, and unions are making a new push to organize those factories.
Organizing the South and organizing the EVs are like the future of the United Auto Workers. If UAW wants to survive and continue to have bargaining power in the auto industry, like this is where they have to be.
That's later in the show. You're inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, focusing on students' futures. Classes available at concord.edu/apply.
Hurricane Helene affected communities across southern Appalachia. One of those is the town of Damascus in southwestern Virginia. Damascus is a popular stop for Appalachian Trail hikers and for riders on the Virginia Creeper Bicycle Trail. It's now in recovery from the storm, which destroyed roads and homes, and it's unclear how long it will take for tourism to bounce back. After the floods, Radio IQ's Roxy Todd spent some time in the area and has this story.
If you've never been to Whitetop Mountain and surrounding communities, picture a view you might have seen on a postcard of a curvy Appalachian road and miles of trees that are already changing color for autumn. These are Virginia's highest points, and some people say the remoteness is part of the beauty. Neighbors have been spending their days helping and feeding each other. At a small convenience store in Connerock, which straddles Smith and Washington counties, Matthew Dell is preparing 200 free hot meals for lunch. Some are being delivered to people who are still stranded in their homes.
There's a lot of people around here that don't have cars, vehicles were crushed, or can't get out themselves.
Since Helene hit, they've served meals multiple days, as have lots of other groups and volunteers. This week, electricity was restored for many residents, and water is being turned on too. Roads are being cleared. The immediacy of this disaster is slowly turning into long-term recovery, which will take months, years. Dell points to where a creek took out a swing set and playground.
So this is where the playground used to sit, and all of that's gone, washed down the creek.
Nearby, the Connerock Community Center is full of supplies, including vegetables, diapers, even generators to give away. Volunteer Carolyn Tracy is busy sorting children's toothbrushes.
We have gas cans and water coming out our ears right now, so if people need water, they can come here and get water.
They also have grain and hay to feed animals. Tracy says many Connerock residents are elderly and are in need of helping hands.
We're coming together, and most people are starting to do cleanup, so anybody that's willing to help with them with cleanup, we would love to have. And if they come to the community center, we can kind of point people in different directions.
Traveling from Connerock to Damascus now takes longer because portions of the road there were washed away in the flood.
We've lost 58 going to Damascus. It's gone.
U.S. Route 58 will need to be rebuilt. The Virginia Department of Transportation is working on plans for how that will work because the road will need a new path.
And the road, when it's rebuilt, will not be what we knew before.
Jason Berry is the administrator for Washington County. Damascus is accessible from Interstate 81, and most main roads are clear. But Route 58 and some side roads that were near creeks were forever changed by the flood.
The reality is the stream was moved. So where the stream was is now in a new location. So in the case of the Creeper Trail and Route 58, the stream took over where they were.
The Virginia Creeper Trail is a 33-mile bike path that runs from Abington to Whitetop Mountain. It runs through the National Forest and the town of Damascus. Economically, this town will have a nearly impossible time bouncing back without the Creeper Trail, says Barry.
Creeper Trail, is the lifeblood of Damascus.
Most businesses in Damascus are tied in some way to the Creeper Trail. The trail has reopened from the starting point in Abington, but rebuilding the second half will mean replacing bridges and steep mountains. And because Laurel Creek changed course during the flood, parts of this trail may have to be rerouted through the forest. Barry says Washington County leadership is committed to rebuilding the Creeper Trail and finding housing for people to keep living in the area.
We know there's about 18 or 19 homes totally lost on the day of the devastation between Damascus and then 2 up on Taylor's Valley. But if you go downtown and you've seen it, there's many homes you can tell are visibly damaged, will have to be torn down, demolished, and rebuilt.
Barry says 7 displaced families in Damascus who were staying at a shelter in Bristol have since moved to a hotel, and local officials are working to help them find places to stay long term. In Damascus, I'm Roxy Todd.
Recovery efforts in western North Carolina continue. After the storm, neighbors jumped in to help each other before government officials and outside help could arrive. And they're still holding each other up. Blue Ridge Public Radio's Gerard Albert III reports.
We've got soap, we've got hand sanitizer, batteries, whatever she needs, put in this tote for me.
Robin Longinati is guiding 2 women through the Hot Springs Elementary School gym. She's carrying a cardboard box and filling it with supplies piled on the retractable bleachers.
Hello, Susan. I had you a box. Have you already picked? I had you a box put back. Did you?
Thank you. I don't know where's it at. I just got here.
Okay. I'll try to find it.
Longinati is one of several volunteers in the gym. The place is stocked like a Walmart. There's bottled water, cleaning supplies, even solar-powered lawn lights. Longinati evacuated before the storm hit. The floods destroyed her home. When she was able to get back there, she grabbed what she could and came here.
Because I couldn't just sit around and do nothing. I had to jump into action the very first day.
Down the road by the Hot Springs post office, more volunteers are handing out food to people helping clear the town of debris.
Sandwiches of the meat variety. And none of them are labeled, but they're all a different type of meat. We have PB&Js, we're doing a chili stew.
Scarlett Ramsey and Ella Delisle recently moved out of town, but they came back when they heard about the destruction.
I saw one of my friends, Rocky, who used to work in the kitchen at the restaurant job that I had here at the Iron Horse, and then Ronnie, who is the head chef there. And I saw them, and they got a hold, and they were like, yo, we need people to serve now. So it feels strangely familiar because we've worked for them, but in like a real restaurant before.
This mutual aid, neighbors sharing with neighbors, extends throughout the entire region. After Hurricane Helene, this type of informal aid was necessary because help from the government took days to get to certain areas.
Currently, we've got all the bookcases moved to the outside perimeter to make as much room as possible for folks coming in and out, loading in, boxes of bananas or propane stoves or what have you.
That's Liberty Valance. She works at Firestorm Books in West Asheville. The employees here have rearranged their shop to house donations.
So right now, the floors of the bookstore are pretty cluttered with supplies, everything from buckets to batteries, piles of sanitary products, baby diapers, infant formula, adult diapers.
Parts of Asheville saw major flooding and destruction from Hurricane Helene. Most of the city is still without running water, which will take weeks to return.
Larger organizations, nonprofits, the state and federal government, obviously ultimately are carrying an enormous amount of weight in terms of actually moving volume of supply. But people and neighbors and kind of local community that was already here obviously had an oversized role in that, especially in those first few days, making sure their neighbors were all right, making sure that everybody had food and water. So I think a space like this can kind of help bridge that gap and be, very responsive to kind of emerging situations.
In the parking lot behind the bookstore, people have been gathering every day at 2 p.m. for community meetings. Information about how and where to get resources changes every day, and part of mutual aid is sharing that information.
First day of the hurricane, someone put a sign on the door calling for a community meeting. And in that spirit, people have continued to put things on the outside of the building, including big sheets of paper with notes from the community meetings that have been happening every day at 2 p.m., but also just dozens of sheets of paper torn from notebooks or pieces of printer paper written on with Sharpie and pen. And, we've got everything here from information about FEMA assistance clinics to detailed instructions on how to get the water out of your hot water tank. It's really just a wealth of community knowledge that I think we don't normally see in this form because of the internet, but particularly in these moments where people haven't been able to connect and share information online, there's been a need for essentially a large community bulletin board. Not only
As I was walking from the parking lot, an employee asked me if I could translate for a woman and her son who were there for supplies.
¿Y café qué tanto me pueden dar?
Do you want the
Nescafé?
Oh, the instant coffee?
Yeah. Take it.
Tomo todo.
Sí.
Yeah.
Sí.
Go ahead.
Somos muy cafeteros. Gracias.
Sí, yo también.
Gracias. Yeah, you're welcome.
Claro.
Sinai Moreno Garcia has had a hard time finding work cleaning houses after the storm. She lives in West Asheville with her young son and husband. She's come to Firestorm a few times for mostly water. Today, she also grabbed some instant coffee.
Sí, como que nos sentimos incómodos, ¿no? Y decimos, wow, todo esto es gratis, ¿no? No puedo creerlo, pero pues sí. Pues no sé a quién le tenemos que dar gracias, pero muchas gracias, la verdad. A todas a estas personas que pues están aquí perdiendo su día o no sé, porque pues no siento que aquí no tienen un salario ellos y sin embargo están aquí apoyándonos a nosotros. Y pues ojalá y pues Dios se los pague.
She says she's thankful for the volunteers who've given up their day to help. She says she didn't know exactly who to thank, but hopes God will repay them. On the other side of town, Rebecca Todd leads a group of volunteers through an assisted living complex.
Anybody medical? Remember bucket carriers? Cool. Yeah. Are you medically trained? Oh, perfect. You're the head of medical. Congratulations.
Todd works with Beloved Asheville, one of the biggest mutual aid groups in the area. Most of their volunteers, like Todd, have no background in disaster response.
Like, I'm a musician. We've lost all of our musical gigs for the foreseeable future, and all we know how to do is help.
After the storm, she had no GPS or cell signal, but had volunteered with Beloved before and knew where they were located.
And that's where we went. And they also knew exactly where the need was and were able to get us a jump start, into the community. And when we got there, they sent us and several other people on missions to simply bring bottled water to communities in need. They already had the list of the need because they've worked with these people for years.
Using trucks, massive containers of water, and a makeshift pulley system, Todd and her team are working to provide water to more than 30 assisted living housing complexes.
You need a flush? Yeah. All right. Let's take care of you.
And as far as I know, the only people helping these people with toilet flushing and sanitation are rogue teams like my own.
Generators like this one outside the Swannanoa Library are giving people a lifeline as power in the area is slow to return. This machine is powering dozens of surge protectors in the bed of a red pickup truck. Meg Murphy is volunteering here.
So it's gotten a little quieter as if we've gotten more power strips and power blocks and cords. So we're able to give folks up to an hour at a time today, where on Saturday we were starting at 30 minutes a pop. We're doing medical equipment, iPads for some folks, battery chargers, all of it.
Murphy has been coming to the library daily to help out how she can. The park next door has a medical supply tent and people serving warm meals. There are poster boards in English and Spanish with information.
Folks are using this as a place to be, to not be alone in your house, to get resources you need. So I think we just encourage folks to register for FEMA. We've got instructions up on one of those boards. And when you see someone, look them in the eye and ask them how they're doing and if they got everything they need. And if not, you help them find it.
As utilities slowly return and communities look to rebuild, Volunteers are hoping that the spirit of mutual aid will remain.
That was Blue Ridge Public Radio's Gerard Albert III. BPR has compiled a list of ways to donate and help with flood recovery and relief. You can check that out at bpr.org. Automakers are investing in new factories and production lines to make electric vehicles, or EVs. Most of these factories are located in the South, in Appalachia. It's a part of the country where unions have struggled to gain a foothold. Now, though, the United Auto Workers, under the leadership of its president, Shawn Fain, is pushing to change that. And it's had some success. Tennessee reporter Katie Myers has been covering this story of energy transition and labor rights. I reached out to learn more. Well, Katie Myers, thank you for coming on Inside Appalachia today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we're talking because of this build-out of electric vehicle factories across the Southeast. I guess a number of companies are leveraging federal funding to invest in new plants in Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. It's even been called the Battery Belt. What's going on here?
Yeah, so the Inflation Reduction Act made nearly $100 billion available for the domestic electric vehicle supply chain. $15 billion of that is to help existing factories transition. So it's a huge pot of money that private companies are obviously really excited about. Meanwhile, the auto industry has been trending towards the Southeast away from its traditional home in the Midwest anyway. A lot of this has to do with the generally lower wages and labor protections and environmental regulations that can be found in many states in the Southeast due to political forces there. And particularly foreign automakers have been moving towards the U.S. Southeast, which is kind of funny. It's almost like a NAFTA style, like, countries like Germany with strong unions outsourcing cheaper labor to us. And a lot of those are electric vehicle manufacturers. They're moving to electric vehicles.
So all these new factories, this investment in manufacturing, comes at a time when the United Auto Workers is making a big push. First, last year, the UAW launched a strike against the big three, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. And now there's been a push to unionize factories in Appalachia in the South, in states that haven't traditionally been friendly to organized labor. How is that labor push going in the Southeast?
I mean, first off, I think it's important to say the UAW strike was like a mark of a change in strategy and direction for UAW. I think, if you talk to people who worked for the union, who were sort of higher up in the union or who were like longtime workers, there was sort of a frustration for a long time around sort of a perceived stagnancy in the union strategy, knowing that the auto industry was sort of trickling out of the Midwest, going towards the Southeast, and like just, struggles with democracy within the union, decisions that weren't being made, with the consent consultation of workers that belong to the union. And so Shawn Fain, for a lot of folks, represented a change in strategy, like real attentiveness towards trying to be forward thinking about the electric vehicle transition, be forward thinking about geographically, like where the union needed to grow. And like this win is like a huge morale boost. And that does a lot for organizing. Workers see you're winning and they're like, oh, like my personal risk that I'm taking in joining this union or in going on strike is less now because more people are with me. This union has won and can win. So that's all to say that the UAW really struggled to organize in the South for a long time, and sort of starting with a big loss at a Nissan plant in Smyrna, Tennessee, which was sort of like the big first foothold of the auto industry in the South. Now that Volkswagen has been located in Chattanooga for a while, they tried to organize Volkswagen a couple of times, lost every time up until this year. And they lost because there's strong anti-union campaigns. There was strong, like, sort of collaborative effort by legislators in Tennessee to trash talk the campaigns, crush them. Workers were scared. Also, many of them didn't have, like, sort of strong, in the Midwest, like, you see people with, union families, people that know, the union paid for their dad's pension or whatever, And like in the South, there's not that same kind of legacy unionism. So it can be hard to convince workers it's worth it. But this time, after 2 tries, UAW won their campaign in Chattanooga, and that was a huge deal. It's like the first foreign automaker, I think, and the first certainly like foreign automaker in the Southeast, and it's an EV parts manufacturer. It's not easy to organize in the South, and they lost, an election after that. They lost the Mercedes-Benz election in Vance, Alabama, because like those same tactics were employed, and that hasn't really slowed. They won in Spring Hill, Tennessee, an Ultium plant, which is, once again, EVs wouldn't have been possible without the strike contract that they negotiated last year. And they just know that, organizing the South and organizing the EVs are like the future of the United Auto Workers. Like they have to. It's, the Biden administration is pushing EVs to be 2/3 of US car sales by 2050. And knowing that industry is moving to the South in this way, if UAW wants to survive and continue to have bargaining power in the auto industry, like this is where they have to be.
That Spring Hill unionization, I understand that was kind of done with the assent of General Motors and LG, the battery company that's located there. Are companies starting to come around on that, or is that a wishful thinking?
That's an amazing question, and I'm not sure I know the answer. I think it's never about companies suddenly opening their hearts. I think that once they understand that the union is a powerful enough force that they have to reckon with it, they can't just ignore it and stomp over it and do a few anti-union videos for their workers and expect things to be easy. Then they know that, they have to deal with the reality of that.
So even after the vote at the Alabama plant failed, UAW's continued to try to organize and has had a success, as you mentioned, in Spring Hill. What's the outlook on the broader future for this push?
It seems like UAW is not going to stop. They're going to keep pushing and putting energy and resources into organizers in the South, which historically not all unions have been great at. They sort of give up the South and say, well, you can't win there, not worth putting your resources into. And so this is kind of a big turn. I think that they're just recognizing that this is a fight for what's called just transition that we in Appalachia know a lot about, but in a different industry. It's sort of this recognition that, energy transition is happening. It is legislatively and politically, it's happening all over the world. It might be happening more slowly than climate scientists would want. And it's, without workers involved in it, it just becomes more of the same extractive relationships to land and people, more dangerous jobs. And it also becomes a PR problem for climate advocates because when workers in fossil fuel industries have high paying jobs that were hard won with, in some cases, literal blood of workers, it's higher paying union work. And then all of a sudden, they're saying, hey, go transition into renewable energy, EVs, whatever. Sorry, the jobs are kind of contracty and not very well protected, and a lithium battery might blow up on you. You can see why workers wouldn't be enthused about that. So, I think UAW and other building trades unions as well, other unions are sort of setting precedents that this is a really important part of the energy transition question. Because obviously it will not happen without people doing the work to make it happen. And the unions themselves are setting precedents that they'll benefit from in the future because they will continue to have membership. And I think there's also a philosophical question of what are we really doing here, right? What kind of world are we building? And, climate solutions where decarbonization is reinforcing existing inequalities, causing new pollution problems with less of a safety net for workers. What is it for? What is it all for?
That was Katie Myers. She covers climate in Appalachia for Blue Ridge Public Radio and the online magazine Grist. The 2023 train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, dumped thousands of gallons of hazardous materials at the crash site. Petrochemical disasters are dangerous for everybody, but people with disabilities are especially vulnerable. Now, there are new guidelines to help support them. The Allegheny Front's Kara Holsapple has more.
Petrochemical disasters could take the form of chemical spills, fires at facilities, transportation accidents, or even events caused by climate disasters like hurricanes. Two co-authors of a new disability-centered guidance for emergency planning during petrochemical disasters say people with disabilities are most at risk when these events happen. Jason Hallmark works for the nonprofit Climate Reality Project in Pittsburgh.
I have multiple sclerosis. That's really when I started looking into the intersection of living with disability and climate and realized, just how disproportionate the impacts are, but also how disproportionate the involvement of people with disabilities is in the climate movement. Often we're forgotten, ignored, and it really shows up when disasters do happen.
A lot of my work is centered around the fact that I'm a cancer survivor and I have chronic illness.
Hillary Flint is Director of Communications and Community Engagement for the group Beaver County Marcellus Awareness Community. She was displaced from her Beaver County home because of the Norfolk Southern train derailment.
Much of this project was really born from what we all learned after the train derailment. We tried to figure out what were the things that could have been addressed ahead of time in a petrochemical disaster, and how do we help communities in the future be prepared for these types of things, and not just prepare the general public, but very specifically the people like Jason and I who have, additional health needs.
What are some of the unique needs of people with disabilities during disasters that the rest of us may not think of?
So for me, the main thing was just this belief that safe means safe for everyone, and that just isn't the case. There are people that might not be able to see their television, might not be able to listen to a radio station, so maybe they didn't even know they had to evacuate. And if we aren't checking in on those people, then we're not really doing an adequate job at disaster preparedness.
Yeah, and there's a lot of unique, I would say, needs that are involved when it comes for planning as well. Disability is not a monolith, so it could vary from person to person. I mean, there's definitely examples, of course, of having accessible transportation after disaster, and some of the census data that came out that showed the majority of people with disabilities who are forced out and evacuated are never able to return home. It's not just the initial of, okay, we need to make sure we have accessible van, that's wheelchair accessible. We need to make sure that each evacuation center is ADA, we always say bare minimum ADA compliant, to look out for these things. But there's a lot of things that people really don't think about, those things that are further along in the process of dealing with a disaster.
How would you like this guide to be used?
I would like to see these guidelines presented to different municipal governments. So I would love if other people that have petrochemical facilities in their region took this guideline and just put it in front of their municipal government.
Getting it in front of people's eyes, decision makers, but also making sure that we can get it out to those frontline communities ahead of time. So different organizations who do things like mutual aid work and people who are going to be first on the scene can really help different organizations with individual preparedness.
Jason Hallmark and Hillary Flint are co-authors of Petrochemical Disasters on Our Warming Planet, Disability Center Guidance for Emergency Planning. To learn more, visit the Allegheny Front. And finally, you wouldn't think it, but West Virginia is becoming a destination for surfing, even though it's landlocked. During the Gauley River's rafting season, surf's up, at least for a while. WVPB's Brianna Heaney has more.
It's a crisp fall day, and the leaves are showing the early glimmers of red and yellow. Standing on a sandy beach, deep in the Appalachian Mountains, Andrew Wagner wears a wetsuit and holds a surfboard. He points to the canyon walls that surround this spot on the Gauley River called Diagonal Ledges.
No cell service out here, but it's gorgeous. Cliff walls, these beautiful sandstone cliff walls.
Other surfers stand on a narrow black rock ledge, holding their surfboards, waiting for their turn to surf.
You're standing there, you're looking at it, the white water is frothing, you're frothing.
Once it's the surfers' turn, they take one big leap. Holding the board to their body, they belly flop into the wave. A few seconds of furious paddling, and they slide into the little valley between two peaking waves.
Behind you, it's over your head, and in front of you, it's over your head. So you're down in this trough, and the water is coming to the top of the wave and breaking back down and crashing, and it's aerated and it's foamy, and that's kind of like holds you in there. But then you need to pop up. you need to get to your feet.
Get up in that classic surfing position. You know, arms out, feet wide. This is river surfing on the Gauley.
River surfing, tis the season.
Starting in September, millions of gallons of water are released from Summersville Lake into the Gauley to help prepare the lake for winter. It's a great opportunity for rafters, kayakers, and surfers to enjoy the rare high flows of the river.
Lately, the scene's been pretty cool. Like, a lot of people have been getting into it.
Wagner says being in the wave is the best part, but it's also fun watching each other surf and feeling a part of that community.
You're out here with your friends. You're hearing the cheers of your friends. And that's like one of the most exciting, awesome parts about it is like being out here, sharing the stoke, and people rooting for you.
One of those cheering voices is Wagner's friend, Brian Bridgewater. Bridgewater started off as a climber, then met some whitewater kayakers and got into kayaking. Then, through that, met some river surfers and started river surfing.
I flopped and flailed around a whole lot my first year trying it.
Now, almost a decade later, he's an experienced river surfer. River surfing is a growing phenomenon. According to the National Geographic, it's one of the fastest growing sports in landlocked regions with powerful rivers. Here in Appalachia, where there's an abundance of whitewater, river surfing is really catching on. It's even got the attention of ocean surfers.
I've gone to the beach and they're like, oh, where do you live? Like, where do you normally surf at? And I'm like, oh, I live in West Virginia. And then they just give you an awkward stare. Oh, that's a landlocked state. Like, where do you normally surf at? And I'm like, on the rivers. And they're just like flabbergasted, to say the least. So,
a couple of landlocked surfers.
Yeah.
From Diagonal Ledges on the Gauley, I'm Brianna Heaney with West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
West Virginia. Yeah, West Virginia.
Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. The theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by Christian Lopez, Caleb Cottle, Steve Earle, Sierra Farrell, Appalachian Roadshow, and Blue Dot Sessions. Bill Lynch is our producer. Xander Alloy is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. We had help this week from Folkways editor Jennifer Gorin. You can find us on Instagram @InAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe or stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, offering 31 bachelor-level degrees and 6 master-level degrees for students of any age. More information at concord.edu.